One of the most popular styles of video is the time-lapse. They're easy to make and the results are almost always promising if you do it correctly. If you've made any time lapses before with really any camera that's at your disposal, then you already have a good starting point for making one with your drone. In this video we'll go from pre-flight all the way to post-production using Final Cut Pro to give you the tips that you need to nail your time lapse every time. With that being said, let's start rolling through one by one each step that you should follow when filming your time lapse. Now step number one, and in my opinion the most important step, think of your subject. Usually this could take a couple of days to actually think about. I know that for this video right here, the example clips that you watch, I've actually been thinking for the past 3 nights about what to film just for the example clips again, so that's how much thought process actually went into this video. I ended up doing some traffic, as you guys saw. I think it looked pretty cool, especially adding on some stabilization at the end. It made it look very solid. Now a couple of things that I like to actually film time-lapse wise is moving water, clouds actually moving across the sky, sunset, sunrise, and also again moving traffic, all of which you can get really cool perspectives with using your drone. One cool thing I want to mention about filming clouds is that if you go up high enough and actually tilt your camera downwards and you have the sun at just the correct angle, you'll notice that you can see the clouds moving in the sky as well as their shadow down on the ground moving across like the trees or whatever again is on the ground, which I think just looks absolutely awesome and again cannot be replicated with any dinky tripod on the ground. So again, step one is to think of your subject and make sure it's something that involves a lot of motion. I think that that's what makes it look the best, especially when it's sped up really fast. Step number two is to go through your pre-flight procedures. You guys know what you do whenever you get on site and pull the drone out of your bag or your box. Make sure the drone battery is fully charged, propellers are on, gimbal guard or gimbal clamp, whatever it's called, is taken off. Again, just make sure you go through everything because your drone is going to be up in the air for well over 20 minutes and you want to make sure everything goes smoothly. Step number three is to set up your camera settings. Once the drone is powered on, you've gone through all of your pre-flight procedures and you're ready to take off, make sure that all the camera settings are set and in place, just so that you're not wasting battery time with the motor spinning up in the air. Now when actually filming your time lapses, we can shoot in video mode or photo mode. There's pros and cons to either of them. In my opinion, I always tend to lean towards video mode, but again, we'll be going over the procedures for both of them in this video. 2 general rules to follow whether you're shooting in video mode or photo mode is to turn on manual exposure as well as manual focus. Now manual exposure will make sure that your camera settings are always the same throughout your shooting, and also with manual focus you won't have that annoying pulsating focus here and there whether you're in photo or video mode. So again, manual focus and manual exposure turned on. Next up, let's take a look at the optimal camera settings that we should be using on our drone when filming a time lapse. For this video, just for reference, I'll be using the Phantom 4 Pro. Now first we'll be going over the video settings, and after that we'll be going over the photo settings, so let's just jump into the application. Now getting into the camera settings, the first screen we have is our exposure settings. I always recommend being on manual as this will give you the best results, and from here, set the ISO, aperture, and shutter speed accordingly depending on what the sun is like outside. The next tab that we have gives us a few more changes. First of all is our video size. I would recommend shooting in 4K as this gives us the most room to play with in post. And of course for the frame rate I'd recommend 30 FPS as usually when speeding up footage we won't need 60 FPS. It really won't benefit us. Next we have our video format. This all depends on whichever computer you're using to edit. .mp4 is for PCs and .mov just works the best with Macs. Next up, let's see, we have NTSC/PAL. This all depends on where you're going to be flying your drone. So NTSC is for the United States people, those living in the States, and PAL is used for those living overseas in Europe. Next up, we have our white balance. This is all dependent on the weather outside. For me, I have it set to sunny, just because I think I was flying last when it was sunny outside. But again, if it's sunny, set sunny. If it's cloudy, set cloudy. This is all a game time decision for you guys. As far as style goes, that is all personal preference. Color, that is personal preference. And camera video coding, again, this is somewhat of a personal preference. I like to use H.264 as it's just most compatible with Final Cut Pro. Now jumping into our final page, histogram I'd recommend turning on as this gives us a very accurate reading as far as what our exposure values will be. Front LEDs auto turn off, I had this turned off so that those front LEDs turn on, just kind of giving me another little area to look for my drone. Lock gimbal when captured, I have this turned on to make sure that my camera is as steady as possible when filming a time lapse. Enable AFC mode, again I have manual focus turned on, so this I kind of have it turned on here just because I was using it last, but again I recommend turning that off. Overexposure warning turned off. I feel like those zebras are annoying. Mechanical shutter has really nothing to do with video, and then the rest are really just kind of bogus little bonus settings you can choose. As far as grid goes, you can turn this on if you'd like. I find it annoying, but again, it is helpful when lining up shots. Overall, I think that center point does the job. It lets me make sure that my shot is right, nice and centered, and of course doesn't take up a bunch of room on the actual screen. Moving on, let's take a look at some of the photo settings for our drone when taking a time lapse. Getting into the camera settings, our first screen gives us again all of those exposure options. Manual is the best, but I'd recommend shooting with a lower shutter speed. So going down to something around 30 or maybe even 40 gives you a certain kind of blur on moving objects, giving you the feeling you're actually watching a video rather than pictures stitched together. So I'd recommend shooting with a lower shutter speed. Jumping over to the next screen, this is where things get a little bit different. For photo mode, I'd recommend going down to time shot, or I'd say you actually have to go down to time shot and choose 2 seconds. So this will shoot in 2-second intervals. Every 2 seconds it'll take a picture. So 1, 2 picture, 1, 2 picture. Anything else is just a little bit too long and kind of makes it seem not fluid. So again, 2 seconds gives us the best, looking time lapse. Image size, I'd recommend 16:9, as you are pretty much going to turn this into a video, and this makes it already cropped to the size of a video. So again, 16:9 works perfectly. Next up, we have our image format. We can choose RAW and JPEG. Now, usually when I'm taking stills, I love shooting in RAW. It gives me so much extra potential for a shot when editing in post. But for this, we're simply making a video out of it, so JPEG will suit you best. In fact, RAW will actually screw you over. The file sizes are larger, and it's impossible to import into a file or a video editing software like Final Cut Pro. I will not be able to input those files, so make sure you're shooting in JPEG. Again, white balance, this is all dependent on the weather outside. Game time decision on your part. Sunny is for when it's sunny outside, cloudy when it's cloudy outside. Style, personal preference, color, personal preference. Jumping over to our last page, histogram, again, turned on. Front LEDs, turned off. Lock gimbal capture, turned on. AFC mode, turned off. Exposure warning, turned off. But for this time, when photo mode comes around, I have mechanical shutter turned on. It eliminates rolling shutter. For this, we're really not going to be moving around all that much. So rolling shutter is not something we'll really have to be all that worried about. But again, I have this turned on. As for the rest of them, again, everything goes the same. Grid, you can turn it on if that helps you line up shots. But for me, I think that center points does it best. Now you may be wondering to yourself what the pros and cons are to shooting in either photo or video mode. This right here is what I've come up with. Honestly, I feel like this is all personal preference. You can take this with a grain of salt if you want. I feel like shooting in video mode to me is a lot easier. I feel like the whole entire post-production workflow is easier. As we're shooting video, we're making a video, and it's being edited in video software. For some weird reason, when I'm shooting with photos and I combine them all together, I can't stabilize the clip, so I need to export it, then re-import it into Final Cut Pro. You guys will see what I mean when I get to the actual post-production part, but overall, I'd have to say that video mode is by far my favorite. Okay, now finally moving on to step number 4. It's very simple, and it's just to take flight. Now for this section, or for this step, I figured I'd give a few tips and tricks here and there, and I've got a couple of them that I'll go rapid fire on you guys and kind of explain my reasoning behind each of them. So I actually have 5 things written down here, 5 tips I can give you guys when filming a drone time lapse. So first of all, always keep your eye on the drone. Be sure that you have that visual line of sight. But more importantly, don't just send the drone up, start taking pictures or video or whatever, and then just walk away. That is the last thing you want to do, as you want to make sure there's no planes nearby and also no birds flying around, as your drone is just sitting there and it's very vulnerable. So again, be careful of those 2 things, plane and birds. Next up, hands off of the sticks. Be sure you make no movements on the sticks or the gimbal, as it could totally ruin your whole entire time lapse. So again, hands off the sticks. Fly for about 20 plus minutes, that's my third tip. I would always recommend flying as much as possible, getting the most footage as possible, as again, you can make a longer time lapse, and if you only take video for like 5 minutes, your time lapse is going to come out choppy, if you're taking photos especially. So again, make sure you fly for the most amount of time as possible. You may get bored, you may just, sit there for 20 minutes, but hey, taking the scenery, get a tan, who knows. Tip number 4 is to film from far away. This will give you the best results and the most stable footage. I found that 200 feet is pretty much like that perfect length. I feel like you get a lot in the shot, but you're also not too high. If you film something like 20 feet away, you'll get a lot of bobbing up and down, and it just won't be stable. So again, film from far away. The final tip is to avoid wind like the plague. Wind is like your biggest enemy when filming a time lapse, as you want to get the most stable footage possible. Now, of course, you can't fully avoid wind, but maybe check on your app, like on your weather app or maybe a drone app, what the wind is like in your area when you're shooting. So that basically concludes everything that you need to do when actually filming for your time lapse. I know that took a long time to explain. Now we're going to get into the post-production phase, and that should be a little bit easier to explain. First we'll be going over video and then photo, but again, let's just jump over to the desktop. To get started with putting the final touches on our video time lapse, we first need to drag the raw video files onto our computer's hard drive for maximum efficiency. Organization is key, especially when it comes to video editing. Once all of the files have transferred, we need to create a new event and project within Final Cut Pro, again staying organized and not mixing clips together. Once these have been created, import your clips to the new event you've created. Now we can drag our video clips into the project to get things started. Our first task is to add stabilization. Allow the editing software to analyze the clip for dominant motion, which could take a few minutes. For the best stabilization results, use inertia cam and select tripod. Once the transcoding is complete, you'll be able to select these options. Now that our stabilization is complete, we can combine our clips into one compound clip. After we have created our compound clip, simply hit Command R to speed up the footage. I think I'll go for 20 seconds here. Now that we have our time-lapse basically complete, add a little color correction to brighten up the colors. Once you've completed all of these steps, export your project to share with your friends. Now moving on. In order to put the final touches on our photo time-lapse, we first need to drag the raw photo files onto our computer's hard drive for maximum efficiency. Again, organization is always key. Once all the files have transferred, we need to create a new event and project within Final Cut Pro. Again, staying organized and not mixing files together. Once these are created, import your photos to the new event you've created. Now we can drag our photos into the project and get things started. First, we need to combine our photos into one large compound clip. This turns out to be much longer than we need, so retime the compounded clip to suit your liking. I'll go with 10 seconds for this one. Now the next step should usually be to add stabilization, but because this is a compound clip, it is not here. In order to trick the software, we need to export what we have and then re-import the exported clip. Hopefully that doesn't confuse you too badly. Now we can finally stabilize the footage, which is actually a much shorter wait compared to the video version. Once it's all shortened and stabilized, it's time to add some color correction to make it stand out. Once you've finished everything that I've discussed in this video, export your time lapse and enjoy sharing it with your friends. So guys, those are the steps that you need to take in order to make a video or photo time lapse with your drone. Down in the comment section, be sure to let me know what you guys think between the whole photo and video thing. I again think that video works the best, but actually the photo time lapse turned out really well, especially with that lower shutter speed. I'll play that for you guys at the end to watch to some music, as I did start out with the video one, so again, I'll end with the photo one. But guys, anyway, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you are new around here, as I have been trying to upload daily, and as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.